Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. This is going to be a very interesting panel. I've got some esteemed experts here. So I'm going to start by going down the line. If you can introduce yourselves, what you do, what your proposition does, and if we kick off also with the first question is why blockchain and what is the potential for applying it in this space?
All right. Thanks, Johnny. Yes, hi, I'm Jim Nasser. I'm formerly, as of about 3 weeks ago, the Chief Software Architect at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the US, which is, I'm sure you guys are probably familiar, is the largest public health agency probably in the world and highly influential. Since a couple of weeks ago, I'm a Vice President of Technology and Innovation at a company called Synchrogenics, which is a software and services outfit in life sciences. So my background with, I guess I'm a technology professional, if you like, an architect by profession. And at the CDC, I led a team that essentially the charge was for us to modernize many of the systems, many of the scientific systems, which are client-facing, if you like, at the CDC. And as part of that, we basically developed many kind of modern, what you would consider as modern software, but eventually kind of wound up down the path of blockchain. And as a result, basically built out our own Ethereum network, built out our own off-chain, a number of off-chain components, including IPFS for decrypted decentralized storage, and built our own smart contracts and such. And that's really how I kind of, I guess, became a practitioner, if you like, in the blockchain space. And that's really kind of where my background is. And I think going forward in the future, I'm probably going to continue doing this, but perhaps more with a global life sciences scope as opposed to just public health. Would you like to answer the question about why why blockchain? Yes, so it turns out, and I'm sure everybody here is quite familiar with blockchain and the basic business concept. So I think of it as a many-to-many relationship amongst peers, and that's really important, who don't either know each other or don't trust each other. So it turns out that public health is very much that business. So CDC, even though it's highly influential and largely funds many other state health departments and local clinics and things like this, is really just a peer, albeit the larger peer and more influential, amongst a group of other peers that basically help in the U.S., help us protect the public, from infectious diseases, help with recommendations on well-being and things like this. So essentially, the business model was a many-to-many relationship amongst peers. And then it also turns out, though, at the CDC, and this is the case across life sciences, that you're dealing with partners, stakeholders, if you like, who you don't actually know, and you don't, even though your mission is similar or is in alignment, you don't implicitly or explicitly trust them. So there's a trust issue, and I always think with blockchain, trust is where you start. The other side of it, I mentioned a little bit earlier, Johnny, that we kind of led this modernization effort. So I'm a huge believer in data and intrinsic value of data. Well, to get to data, you need to really think machine to machine. Well, if you're thinking machine to machine, so then it's not just a concept of humans being trusted, is how do you trust software? So all of this, and not to kind of be belaboring the point, led me to believe that blockchain made sense, and then we actually proved that it really was relevant.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, my name's Rob Lufkin. I'm co-founder of a company called Deep Radiology, and what we do is we use artificial intelligence and blockchain smart contract technology to lower the cost and improve the quality of radiology studies. My background is in computer science. I'm trained as a physician. I'm a radiologist. My old job, I was on the faculty at a large medical school teaching hospital, UCLA in Los Angeles, where I had a lot of fun, and I got to teach doctors how to read x-rays and read MRs and CT scans and that sort of thing. And now in my new job, I have even more fun at Deep Radiology because I get to teach computers to do the same thing. You want me to respond to the question on the blockchain? Blockchain technology, just a couple thoughts about what it can do for healthcare. I think a lot of companies approach blockchain as many things to many people. Many many companies approach blockchain as sort of a glorified super distributed database, and they'll say, oh, we'll put our inventory on blockchain, and now we're a blockchain company or something. And it certainly even adds value like that. But personally, I think that the really exciting possibilities of blockchain are more on the smart contract side, the autonomous side, where we disintermediate companies and massively disrupt things. And I think that's going to be where we see some really exciting things. The example is the blockchain Uber company, which is like Uber without Uber in the middle. But anyway.
So I'm Hugh Halford-Thompson. Is this working? Yeah. I'm Hugh Halford-Thompson, co-founder and chief innovation officer for BTL Group. We're a blockchain company, a technology company listed on the Toronto Ventures Exchange. And I guess I'll answer the why blockchain question a bit as part of the intro as we go. But really, we got into this space with, as you said, with the opportunity to change the way that technology is built and really the way that markets are built in various different sectors. And I've got a lot of experience now in the payments space, in the banking world, in the energy world, where really we started off in the payment space looking at how can we speed up international payments. And rather than going down the public sort of crypto markets route, we're thinking how can we actually get a significant percentage of global payments to have the advantages of blockchain. And that's around instant settlement, around easier reporting, around various aspects which eventually end up being reconciliation issues between banks. And that reconciliation problem is really what delays all these international payments. And it's also what delays effectively business across all sorts of supply chains in different industries. So moving forwards, we've now kicked off a big project in the energy world. We did a pilot with BP, ENI, and Veen Energy, and it was released a couple of days ago. We've now expanded that out to include a total of 9 companies, including Total, Gazprom, Mercuria, Freepoint, Vattenfall, Petronas. So we've got a big group at the market. And they're looking at really streamlining the back office processes in the post-trade space. But if you take all the jargon out of that, that's a reconciliation problem between different companies. A trader enters data in their system, another one enters it in their system, and there's a lot of updates on both sides. And at the end of the month, when they invoice, they're out of sync with each other. So if you look at that whether you're looking in the sort of supply chain world, in the healthcare industry, or if you're looking in areas where you need to share data across companies, this is a huge issue. And I see why blockchain certainly why it interests me is you can build things quicker, cheaper, faster internally. There's a lot of use cases for building just internal projects within one department, which are built better on a blockchain. But really, when you start doing inter-company processes or inter-entity processes, you can automate without having a middleman in between. So there's a lot of third parties who are looking at what's their business going to look like in a few years. Are they still going to be there? There's a lot of large companies trying to say, okay, who can we delete from the picture? And it's a very interesting market. And from our side, our blockchain platform is called Interbit. We built it out for privacy, scalability, and ease of adoption. And I won't go into deep in the tech, but for ease of adoption, we made it in JavaScript. So there's our smart contracts are in JavaScript. So there's a huge talent pool that you can hire from. And the idea is to make it as easy as possible for large companies to adopt.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, just on the back of that, you talked about adoption. So, what do you see as the timescale for it to occur in this space, and also do you see it happening from incumbents, the blockchain adoption coming from existing incumbents, or from fintechs, from disruptive fintechs?
Sure. So, just hands here. Did anybody here, I'm sure most of you guys were here, see Dominic Shiner's presentation yesterday, like at 4 o'clock? Did you guys? Yeah. Okay, so I kind of fall into that category of thinking. I think pragmatic. I think a little bit earlier we had John Ferris on the moderator about energy sector talking about how that is a very slow change industry, and the APIs are like a thing, and there's paper. Well, that is kind of healthcare too, to be honest, right? That's the world. So I think it's great, and it sells articles, and it sells kind of it increases your equity price or whatever. When you talk blockchain and you talk about, we're going to remove intermediaries and we're going to transform and things like this. But my reality, though, is this. From the starting point, and it's different if you're a startup, right? It's different if you don't have legacy things to worry about or loss of regulatory burden and things like this. I think of blockchain as, first and foremost, it can help us be compliant, right? You can use the blockchain to essentially codify your, your data usage agreements, if you like. Data is a currency for healthcare and life sciences. So I think simple. I'm like, I can do that. I can articulate what data usage agreements are because that's the business. And I can, with fairly simple smart contracts, by the way here, does anybody here actually believes that a smart contract is either smart or a contract? Okay, good. Because it is neither, right? It's really very rudimentary coding, scripting, and it's absolutely not any kind of a legal contract. So I think get compliance and then get transparency. You can do that now. That is doable. So I'm not really thinking removing intermediaries. I think that's kind of way down the line. Also, frankly, many of the use cases you hear about is the big kind of business concept seems to be around patient record orientation or patient record management or patient record interaction. Well, all of that requires a really kind of well-adopted and scalable identity management approach. That just isn't there. I mean, seriously, it's not there. I think the closest I see, and this whole idea of self-sovereign identity makes a lot of sense. And recently there's this proposal called ERC 725 by Ethereum to essentially say any Ethereum implementation would essentially be compatible with other Ethereum implementations. But that's just one Ethereum protocol. I mean, we're not talking about Hyperledger or Corda or Hashgraph or none of that. So I'm kind of skeptical about essentially this nirvana anytime soon because I feel like some critical triggers are not going to be there. Nonetheless, though, you can get compliance, you can get transparency, and possibly some automation in terms of regulatory burden reporting and things like this.
I think the legacy healthcare does move glacially, slowly. I think the large legacy companies are going to gradually adopt blockchain technology where appropriate. But I think the true disruption is going to come from smart, agile startups, just like Sears Roebuck, Barnes & Noble, Borders did not invent Amazon.
I've been asked what's the timeline for blockchain adoption for I think about 6 or 7 years now. So I'm hoping, for those of you who remember my answers a few years ago, I'm hoping I'm still consistent. But really, if you look at the way the space has evolved, there was a lot of cryptocurrencies at the start, and then it evolved towards basically the banking sector adopting blockchain. And I remember when we had a Bitcoin meetup we used to run in the heart of Shoreditch. Nothing as grandiose as this now, and the space has evolved a lot. But the first companies to adopt it were banks. They take some of the small use cases that don't make press, they're going live now. Some of the bigger use cases that are super interesting, everyone's always talking about, they're things that take hundreds of banks, thousands of banks working together, and are 5-10 year implementation projects, so they're not going to be first to market in that sense. In the energy space, there's a lot invested as well, both in banking and energy. They're putting a lot of resources behind it, proper funding behind it. And they're looking at not just what does this tech do and what can I do with it. It's how do I deploy it? How am I going to integrate? How am I going to support this? What's the long-term governance look like? All of this is the sort of path at the moment, and it's on their roadmap for deployment. If you start looking in other sectors, there's attached sectors which are close to banking, that are close to energy, that are sort of close behind. And then there's a whole load of sectors who are all starting to look into it. And some companies are ahead, so some are further behind. I think from what I've seen in healthcare, there's a lot of supply chain stuff that's starting to happen. There's a lot of tests going on in various types of projects. I think I don't see any of them going live necessarily this year, but it's going to move towards that, possibly for next year. I certainly see in energy there's going to be stuff going live this year. In banking there's stuff already gone live, and it's just going to explode from here.
So what are the challenges for implementation? I mean, are you getting enough support from government, from hospitals, from the industry in general? Jim?
Yeah. So I can speak to the government piece because that was my life for the last couple of years, at least in the U.S., and not to imply that it's the same, because obviously there are many countries where the regulators are actually quite forward-looking, and even in healthcare have really embraced this idea. Estonia comes to mind, and Australia as well, and some other countries. But so I think, again, I'm going to make a blanket statement, and feel free to poke holes at it. But this is how I feel about it. You know, the degree of sophistication for some of the underlying protocols, the complexity of the technology itself, for a practitioner like me, or even anyone short of like a PhD in cryptography, is very, very hard to really absorb. Okay, so therein, I think is a reality that I see is that the regulators really just don't have the resources to understand some of these things. So, like you see, I mean, and I've read a number of white papers from various, kind of, I guess, new startups or what have you. But honestly, once it gets to the nitty-gritty, to go through the actual math and to really get whether what they're really saying is differentiated and makes sense, I mean, it's very, very, very difficult to have that skill set. So I think that's the situation. So, however, at the same time, I kind of feel like there's also this network effect happening, which is a positive thing. Network effect being that they're hearing it from everywhere, right? It's on the news. You go there, Bitcoin. It's on regular television. It's just not just on like tech kind of podcasts and things like this. So I think because of network effect, there's going to be a real kind of force, and I think of it really as a positive externality to make this happen. However, I just don't think they're adequately skilled to get there. At least that's what I see in the U.S. in terms of regulatory. However, I do actually believe in what Hugh was saying, and I kind of feel like if I put a spin on it from an enterprise perspective, not so much a startup, and you and I were having an offline chat about this, I think it's critical. If you have a 20,000 person organization like the CDC, where I was, if one or two kind of leaders or director of a particular center have an idea and say blockchain makes sense, that's good, but you're not going to get traction unless you build grassroots. I mean, literally, like group of 3 or 4 or 5 people get on Slack, and they riff about this and they actually build things. Because unless you get that, it's very, very difficult to actually change the culture. And blockchain is way more than technology. There's serious economics involved. There's serious process, and really, I think it's a cultural thing. I think of it as kind of it's like an underpinning of things. It's not just technology. So it's more complex and nuanced than saying, well, you just hire one person and that'll make it happen.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to add?
So what's the question in terms of?
The general implementation, are incumbents or startups getting enough support from government and from the health sector in general? So
I guess I can speak the most to support from clients and interest from the client's perspective, and the feedback that we get as I'm going to say not a startup anymore, but as a growing company. But when blockchain is massively hyped. It's in the press everywhere, as you say. Like everyone's talking about it, and everyone wants to take a look. Now, a lot of people who take a look, they don't necessarily get it. A lot of people take a look and want to try something out, want to prove it, and see what can be done for their business. Now, when they start looking under the hood, depending what approach they take, there's sort of different paths they go down. And something that we find a huge amount when we're talking to clients is they say, well, yeah, we've gone down this route, we got stuck at privacy, we got stuck at scalability, so yeah, they're using the wrong platform. You need to get the technology right and architected right for the problem that you're solving. And blockchain doesn't solve everything. It certainly doesn't solve everything easily. But what it is a new tool that you can do new things with. Now, what can you do with it? You can do better, faster, cheaper of the same thing, or you can do certain things across companies in new ways. Now, when people are looking to adopt it, getting the interest from a large corporate is relatively easy. Everyone's already interested. Getting a project moving means you need to get stakeholders involved. You need to get the guy who's going to get the momentum internally. He needs to get involved. They need to put a team together. They need to work out how are they going to build this out. And if they're doing it as a proof of concept, that's probably where it sort of ends. There's procurement and paperwork and all that as well. But if you're going to deploy something live and it's going to be a critical system for this company, they need to work out how they're going to integrate, how they're going to support this, how are they going to find not only 20 people who understand it and can write the smart contract code, but how are they going to find 20 more people and system integrators, et cetera, who understand it when those people leave. So you need to be able to hire out from an existing talent pool. That's why we went down the route where we've done really well from this, is we went down the route of building it all in JavaScript, where if you're a good JavaScript developer, you're good at functional programming, you're good at Redux. These are technologies that long predate blockchain and that everyone's using. So if you want to Google if you want to try and hire JavaScript developers, it's very easy to find. So if a corporate can see what that adoption route is going to look like, and there's not too many unknowns left in the way, then they will get behind this. And there are very big numbers involved. Internally, there's huge cost savings in the millions or hundreds of millions, depending on the company. But then, if you look at the intermediaries that can be, the way the markets can be restructured, there's billion-dollar contracts that are going to be moving around. And how many companies are there whose sole purpose of existence is to provide a trusted source of data? So you've got a group of companies who provide that data, and then they sell it back to them. Well, the reason you need that is because you need somebody to host it. Well, now you can have all the companies hosting it equally without that central middleman. And you need a governance layer. You need certain things. It's not necessarily quite that simple. There are more things to it, but you can restructure that market, which has been the same for 20, 30 years. And that's something that is starting, it's happening already in the banking world, it's happening already in the energy world, it's happening in smaller ways in various other sectors, but my longer term prediction is in the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing some of the some billion-dollar companies whose sole purpose is to be a trusted source of data, whose share prices are going to significantly move because people are questioning if they're needed anymore and markets are moving.
Thank you very much. Quick question for Rob. Why tokenize it?
Why tokenizing? It allows us to basically have economies of scale. The tokens allow us to disintermediate for foreign exchanges, bankers, tariffs, that sort of thing. By using tokens, we can easily employ our own smart contracts, so we cut out collections, receivables, billing, accounting, that whole layer there. And then the tokens allow us to incentivize our own community and easily give micropayments and that sort of thing.
That's it. Thank you. How are we doing for time? So no time for questions. Sorry about that, guys. We got carried away. But thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you very much for a very enlightening conversation. Thank you.